In a single April night in 1717, 144 pirates drowned in 10 fathoms of freezing Atlantic water. Nearly 3 centuries later, divers began pulling their bones, their shackles, and their shattered muskets from the ocean sand. The Atlantic of Cape Cod does not forgive. It swallows ships whole and keeps them beneath shifting sandbars. Hidden beneath cold green water that never quite warms, it kept a secret for 267 years. A secret that rewrote what the world knew about piracy. Not the fantasy of chests and singing rogues, something older, something crueler. Something built of iron, bone, and stolen gold. A darker inventory than legend admitted. To understand what divers pulled from that inventory, you must first understand the world that made it. The golden age of piracy burned bright and short, from roughly 1715 to 1726, 11 years.
11 years in which a few thousand men and a handful of women hunted the Atlantic trade lanes. They sailed under the black flag, striking merchantmen carrying sugar from Jamaica and silver from the Spanish Main. And, most profitably of all, human beings taken in chains from the fever-ridden coast of West Africa. The triangle trade was a machine. It moved rum, molasses, guns, and captives in an endless, brutal circuit. It fed European fortunes with African suffering. And under the black flag, the pirates fed on the machine. Cape Cod, at the northern edge of this world, was known to sailors as the graveyard coast. Its hook curves out into the Atlantic like a snare. Its outer beaches are lined with hidden shoals. They lie invisible beneath the swell, and wooden hulls did not survive an encounter with those sandbars. They shattered on impact and sank in minutes, carrying every soul aboard into the freezing black below.
More than 3,000 vessels are believed to have gone down along that shore over the long centuries. Only one has ever been definitively named. Only one raised from the sand and identified beyond all question. Her name was the Whydah Gally, the only pirate ship ever raised, named, and identified beyond doubt. The Whydah was born a slaver, built in London 1715, a 3-masted galley of 300 tons. She was designed for one grim purpose: to carry captured Africans across the Middle Passage of colonial commerce. Her maiden voyage carried her to the Gold Coast, where her captain filled her hold with 500 souls. She delivered them to Jamaica and traded them for sugar, indigo, and precious metals bound for London. On her return, laden with the proceeds of that trade, she was intercepted by the Prince of Pirates himself. His name was Samuel Bellamy, and history would forever remember him by another name: Black Sam. Bellamy was young, perhaps 28 when he took the Whydah, tall, dark-haired, and rough of eloquence. He wore no powdered wig. He tied his black hair back with a ribbon of dark silk. He carried 4 pistols in a silk sash and a cutlass at his hip, built for boarding. Under the black flag, he had already grown wealthy, but the Whydah was his true masterpiece. She was fast, she was armed with 28 guns, and she was now his flagship on the Atlantic. But one April storm turned the richest pirate ship afloat into little more than scattered evidence beneath the waves. On the 26th of April, 1717, the Whydah lay off the coast of Wellfleet on outer Cape Cod.
A nor'easter came in from the sea, among the most violent weather systems on the eastern seaboard. Winds of 70 knots, seas of 30 feet, freezing rain that turns the wooden deck to solid glass. Bellamy's crew tried to work off the lee shore, but the merciless wind drove them landward toward disaster. In the small hours before dawn, the Whydah struck a sandbar 400 yards from the beach.
Her masts snapped, her hull rolled, her keel split. Cannons broke loose and crushed the men beneath. Chests of coins tore through the timbers. Within 15 minutes, the Prince of Pirates' flagship was gone. Of 146 souls aboard, only 2 survived. The rest drowned within sight of unreachable shore. Their bodies washed up for weeks along the beaches of Wellfleet and Truro, then the ocean covered what remained. For 267 years, the Whydah lay buried beneath the sand, forgotten by all but storytellers. Then, in 1984, a Cape Cod native named Barry Clifford began hunting for the vanished pirate wreck. He had spent years reading old survivor testimonies, court depositions, and yellowed colonial maps of the treacherous coast. He assembled a team, chartered a boat, and systematically searched a stretch of cold seabed off Marconi Beach. He found scattered debris, then a cannon, then a heavy mass of concreted iron rising from silt.
Then, one summer afternoon in 1985, his divers lifted a small, corroded bronze bell from sand. The bell was cracked and encrusted with sea life, its shape barely recognizable beneath centuries of ocean growth. But engraved across its shoulder were the words, "The Whydah Gally, 1716," impossibly, undeniably preserved by the deep. It was the first pirate wreck in history to be definitively identified. What surfaced first was a name. That bell answered one question, yet the questions it raised were far larger than any treasure could satisfy. As Clifford's team kept diving, kept excavating, kept lifting objects, a strange paradox emerged from the black seabed. The cargo was there, undeniably, but the chests were not. No locked coffers, no piled ingots anywhere. No glittering hoards awaited them. What lay on that seabed was something stranger, and something far more revealing. Over 4 decades, more than 200,000 artifacts would be catalogued from the Whydah site. 200,000. Each one a fragment of a forgotten world. Coins came up by the thousands. Spanish pieces of 8. Minted in Mexico City, Potosi, and Lima, their edges clipped and worn from 100 rough transactions. Alongside them came gold, not European gold, Akan gold, crafted by the goldsmiths of the West African coast. Beads, small ingots, worked jewelry that once adorned the wrists of people whose names the ledger never recorded. That gold had passed from Africa to a slaver's hold to a pirate's plunder, its journey written in blood. Iron concretions the size of boulders, pistols, muskets, buckles and buttons fused together by centuries of chemical reaction. Conservators had to X-ray these masses to find what lay inside. Some concealed grenades, hollow iron balls, filled with black powder, fitted with fuses, meant to be lit and thrown onto an enemy's deck.
Others held navigational instruments, brass dividers, a sand-glass frame, fragments of a nocturnal to reckon by stars. Pistols emerged still wrapped in silk sashes, the fabric pressed flat by centuries beneath the weight of sea. Yet among the cold metal, something organic waited. In the summer of 2006, divers descended. They brought up a concretion far heavier than expected, cleaned and slowly broken apart in the Provincetown lab. Inside lay a human femur, a left thigh bone, beside a silk stocking, a leather shoe, black pistol. The bone was small, too small for a grown man. Forensic analysis suggested a boy, perhaps 10 years old. 8 to 11 years of age, no more than 4.5 feet tall, a child aboard.
The team knew the name at once. John King, a 9-year-old boy, the youngest confirmed pirate in recorded history. His story survived through a court deposition given by another sailor, Abijah Savage, captain of the sloop Bonetta. When Bellamy captured the Bonetta near Antigua in 1716, a boy of about 9 refused to be released.
He wanted to join the pirates. When his mother tried to hold him back, he threatened to kill her, and then himself if he was not allowed to sail under the black flag. Bellamy took him aboard. 7 months later, John King drowned with the rest, swallowed by the freezing black Atlantic of Cape Cod. His shoe, his stocking, his small leg bone lay buried in the sand for 289 years, until divers brought them up. A single child's shoe undid 2 full centuries of romantic pirate fiction, because this was the truth. The artifacts began to force upon everyone who studied the wreckage below. The pirates of the Whydah were not the powdered rogues of legend or brotherhoods of free-spirited adventurers. They were men, boys, and captives crammed into a wooden hull stinking of tar, gunpowder, and human sweat. And among them, distributed through the wreckage in a pattern that told its own quiet story, were the coins. The coins were not in chests.
They were in pouches, small leather bags, one carried to a man. Each contained an individual pirate's share. Bellamy's crew operated on the strict articles of the pirate code. Plunder was divided in agreed proportions. The captain took a share and a half. The quartermaster took 1 1/4. Ordinary hands took 1 share each. Injured men received compensation from a common fund, a rough form of insurance. Wealth aboard the Whydah was not hoarded in some hidden captain's chest. It was carefully distributed among the crew. Every man carried his own fortune in a purse at his belt, close against the coat and the ribs. And when the ship went down that April night, each purse went down with its owner into the dark. The X marks the spot fantasy of buried treasure. That fiction was born of a novelist's imagination 2 centuries later. It collapsed the moment the first leather pouch was cut carefully open on a marine conservator's quiet bench.
But the Akan gold demanded a harder question, because that gold had not come from a Spanish galleon, it had come from a slave ship. The Whydah herself had been such a ship before Bellamy took her. Before Bellamy, she had already carried her human cargo across the Middle Passage under the black flag of trade. The gold she brought back from Jamaica was gold traded for African lives. Bellamy inherited that bloodied wealth. When his crew died in the surf of Wellfleet, they died with the fruits of that trade upon them. Piracy in the Atlantic did not exist outside slavery. It was slavery's twin, feeding on the same roots, plundering the same holds. The gold's true origin implicated every man who walked above deck under the flag. The horrors did not end with the gold. As excavation continued, artifacts came up speaking of daily life aboard. Cannons were recovered, still loaded, powder charges intact, iron shot rammed home, ready to fire the moment needed. Bellamy's crew had gone to their deaths primed for battle, expecting a fight rather than a raging storm. Grenades came up by the dozen. Some were hollow iron, some glass, filled with powder and jagged metal fragments. Early anti-personnel weapons meant to shatter across a deck, the brutal calculus of the golden age of piracy. Leg irons were recovered, sets of them, iron shackles designed to lock around a human ankle beneath decks. Because the Whydah, at the time she sank, still carried captives, Africans aboard her since her slaving days, others taken from ships Bellamy had plundered. Not all of these captives were free when the storm struck. Some fought alongside the pirates, some, apparently, did not. Their fate lay hidden beneath the churning Atlantic surf. The irons that held them lay in the sand, alongside the pistols and the pouches and the scattered bones. The provisions told their own story. Hardtack survived, riddled with weevil tunnels bored through before the crew ate it.
Salted meat had reduced to nothing but the crude iron hoops of the casks that once held it. The men aboard the Whydah lived on food that would make a modern soldier retch and refuse the ration. And when they were injured, they were treated by a ship's surgeon whose tools also lay on the seabed. A bone saw, a trephine, a small crown-shaped drill for opening skulls. A cauterizing iron heated red, pressed against a stump to stop the bleeding. There was no anesthesia. There was rum, and often death. The next artifact named a woman never meant to sail. Her name was not on the Whidah's manifest, but her name is inseparable from the story. Maria Hallett of Eastham on Cape Cod waited ashore, a young woman with whom Samuel Bellamy had fallen in love the year before he took the Whydah. He promised to return to her a rich man. Some versions say she bore his child. The child died. Some say she was cast out by her village, living in a dune shack, watching for a ship. On the storm's night, she stood on Wellfleet Bluffs and watched the Whydah's lights founder in the surf. Historians still debate whether Maria Hallett was real, invented, or some composite of several forgotten coastal women. But her presence in this story is not accidental. She stands for every woman shaped by pirate men. Every woman whose life was rewritten by the sailors who took the black flag and never came home. The storm that killed Bellamy was extraordinary. Winds gusting to 70 knots, seas rising to 30 feet. The Whydah, driven landward against her crew, struck the outer bar past midnight, ripping her keel open. The masts crashed down in a tangle of wet rigging that trapped drowning men in the freezing water below. The hull rolled, spilling cargo, cannon, and bodies into the surf. Within 15 minutes, she was debris, and the men who had sailed her were drowning in freezing water. They could not long survive.
Fortune favored the ruthless, and even the ruthless were not favored under the black flag that night. By morning, bodies had begun to wash ashore, and they kept washing ashore for weeks along Cape Cod. The colonial governor of Massachusetts, Samuel Bellamy, dispatched an agent named Cyprian Southek to salvage the wreck site. His orders were clear: recover what he could on behalf of the crown: coin, cargo, silk, cannon. He arrived to find local residents already stripping the dead, dragged from the surf and searched raw. Coins had been prized from pockets, silk cut from corpses. The beach had claimed its lawless due. Southek wrote furious letters demanding return of crown property, but recovered little from the ruthless beachcombers of Wellfleet. Most of what the sea gave up, the beach kept. What the crown seized then, divers reclaimed later. When Clifford's team began working the site in the 1980s, they completed a salvage abandoned since 1717. They pulled from the sand what neither Southek nor the beachcombers of Wellfleet had ever been able to reach. The parts of the Whydah settled too deep, buried too quickly, or fused into concretions too heavy to move. In doing so, they gave the world its first, and still its only, fully authenticated pirate wreck. For centuries, pirate treasure had been the stuff of speculation and fraud. No wreck ever definitively proven. Sailors claimed wrecks of Blackbeard, Kidd, Every. None were ever proven. The Whydah stands alone. The bell was proof. With that proof came archaeological certainty about what a pirate ship of the Golden Age actually carried aboard.
What it contained overturned the popular myth. Bellamy's crew was not, as legend held, purely a crew of Englishmen. Reconstructed from bones, personal effects, and surviving depositions, the Whydah's company proved multiracial and multinational in composition. Roughly 30 to 50 of Bellamy's men were of African descent, some liberated from captured slavers themselves.
Others were free sailors who had chosen the black flag over the flogging discipline of the merchant service. They fought, ate, drank, and died alongside their European crewmates, under articles giving all equal voice and share. Piracy was brutal, lawless, often monstrous, yet, for a violent moment, one of the Atlantic's rare equal grounds. The truth behind the myth? Bellamy's crew was no brotherhood of jolly rogues, but a brotherhood of the desperate. Sailors escaping Royal Navy floggings. Escaped indentured servants, escaped slaves, men with nothing left in the world to lose. Under the black flag, they lived months at most. Bellamy commanded the Whydah barely 2 months before she sank. Pirate careers were measured in weeks, not years. The gallows or the sea took nearly all of them. The Whydah's artifacts now rest in a museum at Yarmouth on Cape Cod, sealed behind quiet glass. Visitors stand before display cases, holding coins still crusted with sea life and cannons stripped of centuries. And smaller, darker objects, the remains of a boy once named John King, displayed as testimony. His bone, his shoe, his stocking. Not as trophies, but as witnesses to what records could not say. A 9-year-old child sailed with pirates, drowned with pirates, lay in sand for 289 years. Popular culture has not caught up with this Bellamy of television and film, the roguish charmer, the swashbuckling captain with wind in his hair. But the archaeological Bellamy is harder and far darker. A young man who profited from slavery even as he tore at its edges aboard the Whydah. A captain who commanded free black sailors and still kept leg irons stowed within his own hold. Neither the villain of the moralist's sermon nor the hero of the novelist's dream, something more difficult.
A man who lived briefly, killed and stole for a season, then drowned in 10 fathoms of Atlantic. On an April night, while a woman on a bluff, real or imagined, watched his lantern die. And still the sand holds him. Only a fraction of the Whydah has ever been fully excavated. The wreck field extends across acres of seabed, concretions the size of automobiles lying beneath shifting sand. Inside them, conservators believe, wait more bones, more pouches, more names, still buried in cold silt. The ocean has not finished giving up its inventory. Every winter storm shifts the dark bottom again. Every summer season brings new finds from the abyss, raised by patient hands and slow currents. 2/3 of the Whydah's dead, 100 men and boys, have never been recovered from below. They lie where they fell in 1717, held down by iron and time beneath cold water. The sand still holds 2/3 of the Whydah's dead, silent, unnamed, waiting beneath the black flag. That is what divers actually found on the ocean floor. Not chest of gold, not the fantasy the storytellers sold. They found a small bronze bell, cracked at the lip, and leather pouches of clipped and worn coins. They found the femur of a 9-year-old boy who wanted more than anything on earth to be a pirate. They found grenades still fused, cannons still loaded, leg irons still locked in the cold Atlantic silt. They found the wreck of a slave ship taken by pirates who died carrying gold that bought human lives. They found, in short, the truth. And the truth, as it so often is, was darker than the legend. If you want to know how Blackbeard's Queen Anne's revenge met her end, the next video is already waiting. Join the crew and set sail with us. Raise the black flag.